Tag, meine Damen und Herren. Ich begrüße Sie zum T-Systems Branchenforum 2021.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to welcome you to our T-Systems Forum 2021. So, Digital Decade, Technology for a Sustainable Future. And this is the scope for today. And we would like to invite you to take a view at the big trends, digitalization and sustainability today. So you can look forward to a very interesting mix of information and interaction. My name is Ralf Bretting, and I am the moderator for this session today. This is a live event, and we are here in our studio in the Telekom Design Gallery, Bonn. So over the next 90 minutes, you are going to see presentations that are going to be giving you background information. They're supposed to set impulses and inspire you. And it's going to start a discussion that you shouldn't be missing. And at around 11:30, we are going to have 4 live breakout sessions with experts from many different industries. Chemistry and pharma are represented, transport and trade, health, and also banking and insurance. You're going to have the opportunity to actually join these sessions and learn about best practices from BASF Henkel, Renus, which is the School for Organization and Management of OM, as well as the Institute for Applied Logistics at the University of Würzburg. And we have more information in store for you, and you are going to be able to find them in the on-demand area until 2 p.m. today. You are going to find recorded sessions, videos, and also webinars. And of course, I would also like to make you aware of the virtual event that is also happening during this event that's already open. So for those of you who don't know this informational offer, this is a must-see from many different industries that are included here, and you can actually use your personal avatar and go through the different booths and talks to experts live. And by doing that, you can also learn about the partner solutions by Fortinet, Intel, AWS, and Ericsson. And one more tip, so if you are joining our exhibition, also try to live network there. I can promise you that is an experience that you are never going to forget again. So should you have any questions about the program, or if you have questions to any of the speakers or anything else, if you need support or anything like that, please use the chat feature that is going to be available to the right of the live stream window. And our T-Systems colleagues in our back end are looking forward to your remarks and are happy to help. Okay, and now my final tip, a recording of this live stream, as well as the 4 breakout sessions, plus all the digital informational material around the T-Systems Forum 2021 is going to be available on this platform throughout this day. And yeah, with that, we are ready to get started, and we can start with our opening keynote. Ladies and gentlemen, our world is facing 2 big challenges at the moment. On the one hand, it is going to be more digital, regardless of it's the economy or our society. Digitalization is penetrating our lives. And the EU Commission now looked at the digital change in Europe until 2030, and that is our top priority. On the other hand, we can also see very clearly that the way we're living and the way we are living our lives have negative impacts on our Earth. There are only very few people who understand the connection between connectivity and digitalization, more so than our keynote speaker today. I'm very much looking forward to have Yogeshwar here. Many of you see him on a regular basis at ARD like Quartz or as a guest at Anneville. However, Ranga is not only Germany's most popular TV scientific journalist, but he is also a grandfather ever since last year. And I can tell you his grandchild Emil changed his perspective, how he looks at connected machines, artificial intelligence, or also other areas that are changing right now. So all of that has changed ever since he's become a grandfather. Okay, so now we have Ranga Yogeshwar here, and he's going to show you Emil's world, and we are going to take a look at the future. Ranga. Yeah, I would also like to say welcome, welcome. I'm very happy to be able to speak to you this morning. And we are living in a world that is moving so quickly, and you've already heard it. It is really all about my grandson and the world behind him.
Erleben alle im Grunde genommen momentan eine Ausnahmesituation. Die Ausnahmesituation kennen Sie alle.
Yeah, so we are all experiencing a very special situation that we're all aware of. And that is the corona pandemic. That virus is very difficult for all of us. And specifically what has happened to me? Well, a lot of different events, life events have been canceled. Everybody knows that. However, then something else happened, and that was something that was quite positive. There's not only one side in life, but my grandson Emil was born. He was born last year. And I have to say one thing that really touched me about that is the fact that if you see a young child and you hold him in your hand that was born in 2020, and if you just imagine statistically, Emil is going to turn 80 or even older than that if God wants him to. So he's going to experience not only the next decade, but even more than that. Everything that we call a future is going to be his reality, and he's going to be here for centuries to come. And that also shows that in the future and all the visions that we have in the context of sustainability are going to be very important. It's not just an abstract story, but for that generation, that is their reality. And what do you do being a new grandfather? The very first thing I did was I did something. So I actually created this little horse for him. That was nice. And in the beginning, of course, I did it digitally. However, then I also did it, and now it's a wooden little horse for him. And you can see, looking at these images, that it worked quite well. That was phase 1 of the pandemic. But then phase 2 came along, and phase 2 then led to me switching to digital lives. And I think that's the most important thing. And that's something we've all learned in this crisis. We have to be flexible, taking opportunities, even though we're going through a crisis. And the fact that I can speak to you this morning is just due to the fact that I actually have a very good online studio here in my home. And I would also like to say thank you to my colleagues who helped me, my telecom colleagues who helped me, because I actually have actually good connection in my house, which wasn't cheap, just so I have the right infrastructure. However, the interesting thing about that is if we think about Emil's world, we can say, okay, where are the special challenges? And specifically in the context that has to do with sustainability, we have to say that it's very clear that that is playing a very specific role. In this context, I would also like to interact with you. So I want this session to be very interactive, and I would now like to ask you to take your phone, your cell phone, because this morning we are going to ask you a couple different questions. So you're going to have to turn on your smartphone, and then you can either use your camera and scan the QR code, or if that doesn't work, if you're at your desktop, for example, you can just go to the website www.menti.com and then the code 2393393. And I do have a couple questions prepared for you, and those are questions that I would like to ask you. And the very first question has something to do with our vaccination status. So I would just like to know, are you vaccinated already, or are you in the process of being vaccinated? And I can tell that the first answer is already here. So that is going to update after a while. And what I think is very interesting about all of this is, yes, oh, okay, there's somebody who's fully vaccinated already. That is nice. So that is just changing. And just in case some of you don't have the code, I'm just going to show it again. So the QR code, you can scan that, or you can go to www.menti.com, and then the code is 2393393. Okay, and yeah, so we can see things are happening, and that is definitely going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. So all the data is then going to be sent to you. So you're going to be able to see all the results of our respective surveys. And yeah, I am going to then ask you a second question right away. So when is the pandemic over? Is it going to be this year? Is it going to be next year? Or is it going to take even longer? So again, take your phone and let us know. You always have to consider that as of right now in Germany, we have very, very low numbers, one-digit numbers, to be honest. However, as we all know, the different variants of concerns definitely are concerning to us. And there's the Delta Plus and Delta option in India, Maharashtra specifically. And your idea is sort of in line with what I'm thinking. So we are definitely not talking about this year, but it's going to be next year. And coupled with that, I have another question, and the question being, we all saw that during this pandemic, a lot of things have changed. And my question is, what is going to happen after the pandemic? So what is the change like after the pandemic? Are we going to go back to the old business model? So business as usual, or are you going to think, no, there are only going to be a few changes that are going to remain, or I do think that there's going to be more to come. And what we see here is very clearly that there's a trend that I see everywhere. So a lot of people think, no, it is not the case that everything is going to go back. The pandemic is not going to be the big exception, but the pandemic was an accelerator. So if we talk about sustainability, we also have to think about all the different things that we have to link here. And we all know that we do have one big mega topic, and that is definitely relevant to the generation email, and that is climate change. So you can definitely see the average temperatures of the past 100 years from left to right, and you can see that the world is getting warmer and warmer. And the very interesting thing about that is that we always think that one, which is the climate change, and the other thing, which would be Corona, doesn't have anything to do with each other, but I can just tell you, you have to take a closer look, because in fact, there is a direct connection. There's a direct link. So that means that climate change and viruses like that definitely plays an important role. And of course, there is one study by Harvard and without talking about details, I'm just showing you one little excerpt here. You can definitely say that many of the root causes of climate change also increase the risk of pandemics. So that means, saying it in different words, and I do think that is very, very important for us to understand, we don't talk about sustainability being a nice add-on, but instead we realize that one thing is definitely linked directly to the other thing. So that means if we want to avoid future pandemics, we have to be more active when it comes to sustainability and climate change. So during the pandemic, we definitely learned that a lot of things are happening. One specific example are mega cities such as Beijing, for example. Everybody who's been there before knows that the air is a catastrophe. However, at the point in time where there was a lockdown and a shutdown, you can see that the air quality improved by a lot. And that is also something that you can see with scientific proof. So overall, there is an improvement of CO2 emissions, and that was reduced because of the shutdown. And that is something that we've all experienced as well, because I'm a good example for that. So Greta Thunberg, for example, is not going to like that, but I'm going to show you my entry ticket. So this is Lufthansa. Those are my miles of 2019, and I'm at about 170,000 miles. Greta Thunberg is going to hate that. So my CO2 footprint is crazy. And I do think we all learned a lesson, and that means we don't have to do that in the future. So in the future, a lot of meetings are going to be happening online, like this meeting this morning and this presentation this morning, and that is saving a lot. So we do know that things are definitely happening. The Zoom boom, as it is called, is definitely happening at the moment. And similarly, we've also had another lesson learned, which is online shopping. Again, even in that context, you can see an upward trend. And interestingly enough, we can see that the CO2 footprint, depending on how you get there, is also definitely more favorable than classic shopping. And of course, we have to be aware that it is still not the great majority. So I just showed you the current numbers from the United States. And if we look at online shopping in comparison to regular retail, as of right now, it's 14%. When it comes to home office or telework, we are talking about roughly 16.6%. So saying it differently, there is still room for improvement. However, we can tell that even if they're small trends, of course, they are going to continue on. And of course, that is also true for work. So we can ask ourselves, okay, how much sense does it make to commute to the office in the morning and then sit in front of a screen and then commute back home? So that regular 9-to-5 job, my question is really, is that going to have a future? However, I don't only wonder that myself. I would also like to ask you. So what do you think? So we can see the change after the pandemic is definitely going to be quite big. As you can see, I'm also going to show the QR code again for everybody who has not joined yet, maybe those that have joined later. So you can actually vote live today. So you can either use the QR code by scanning your camera, or you can use 2393393 on menti.com. And yeah, so my question is, what is the future of work like? So if the pandemic is over, what do you think? Office versus home office, what is that going to be like? So do you all think you want to go back to the offices, or do you say, no, home office is definitely better, it's more beneficial? And again, we can definitely see a very clear trend, which is that maybe in T-systems, that is quite understandable. So yeah, the majority of people are saying home office is better. And I personally also do believe in that. I'm definitely sharing that same opinion. I also think that home office is definitely coming with a lot of advantages. And that is a great example for digitalization and sustainability, for the simple reason that because of these measures, the CO2 footprint is being reduced by a lot. So we are now entering a world that is more and more digital. And in this context, it is very, very interesting because there are lots of consequences that come with it. Specifically, I, for example, live out in the country, and you can wonder, okay, well, what is it going to be like there? So first and foremost, the architecture itself is also learning that we have to be more sustainable. So buildings, greenhousing, etc., all of that is going to be more and more important in the future. So this is one of the biggest office buildings in the world that is in Singapore, Marina 101. And I actually spoke to the architect about exactly that, Christoph Ingenhofen. Christoph, well, there's a great YouTube stream with him. You can access that on my page. But I asked Christoph, how do you feel about that? What do you think is going to happen if in the near future there's going to be more online shopping, if people work from home a lot more? And we definitely see a trend here. So the old structure of cities may actually change. So in the future, we are going to have more people who want to live outside of cities and enjoy that. And of course, I can only say specifically for T-systems or overall for communication and the communication industry, that is great, because I am the living proof of that. I do live out in the country. I do have a very nice and stable Wi-Fi connection. As you know, it's glass fiber. And of course, I can actively participate. And that doesn't only solve the question of less traffic, but also the question of the big discrepancy between so we can tell that there are lots of things that are happening, and it's definitely going in a direction that is quite interesting. And as you have to admit yourself, over the next few years, it is going to continue on. So I would now like to, well, I know that I don't have a lot of time, so I would like to now talk about one important topic, and that is definitely also the topic of artificial intelligence. It's about data that we are using a lot more in many different industries. And I would like to pick out one example, which is medicine. And it's really specifically about lots of IT companies now understanding that. And I would like to show you that by way of an example. So that would be this man right here. His name is Mac Little. And he used to work at MIT before, and now he's a researcher at the Aston University. And Max is a mathematician. And he said something very, very interesting, or did something interesting. All of you have a smartphone, just like I do. And in the smartphone, there are lots of sensors. Among them, there is one acceleration sensor. And what Max is doing with that is the following. He actually evaluates the up and down of the acceleration sensor. What's very interesting about that is when you're walking, there are some irregularities that he can register. And with the help of an algorithm and also lots of data learning, he can figure out, okay, in this case, people who actually have some discrepancies do have something that we call precursor syndrome in Parkinson's. So using this data, he can diagnose Parkinson's at a very, very early stage. And that is extremely relevant because Parkinson's, as we all know, is a disease that is not curable. So that means that there are new opportunities arising, and these new opportunities are going to be very, very important in the future. That also holds true for Corona, the coronavirus. We are all hoping that there are going to be great vaccines, etc., and that these vaccines then actually have to block the receptor of the virus. And what's very interesting about that is if you look at what is happening when it comes to AI, so that is very, very fascinating because even today we are in a position to look at these proteins and we can calculate all of that with the help of AI. And we can optimize their protein structures. And the big benefit of that is if we do that, we can also make it where medications can play a more important role. It's very interesting to see what is happening over the next years. And that is also something that you can drive further. So if you say, okay, and some experts are saying that you can use prediction from genetic testing, for example, biological testing. You can make more out of that. And I'm going to show you a very specific example about that. So prediction being the big topic. So today, and again, digitalization does play a very important role. It's the driving force. So you can actually make progress in medicine much quicker. You can make genetic testings very easily. And I have done that. And you can already determine your biological age. So specifically in my case, I have taken the test and there is my birth age. So I took it in 2017. It was completely new then. I was 58 then, but my biological age in comparison was only 54. And the very interesting thing about that is that you can continue with that. And I do have a question for you because you're going to be able to tell how old you're going to be using KI. So sort of your year of death and determining that. And I would like to ask you, would you like to know that? So here's my question. And I can tell that some of you have already answered it. So I think it is very interesting. It's very interesting because the portion of people who said yes is continuously increasing, especially over the past few years. And what I think is very fascinating about that is that there are more and more people who say they want to know, and maybe that is an indicator for a cultural change. And in this context, you can also tell that if you're asking people why they say, well, because if I know that if I die 3 years after I retire, I want to start working sooner. So possibly we are going to really see an epochal change when it comes to planning your life.
What we have to assure is to look at sustainability. There are benefits that also help in other countries, for example, to have AI diagnostics of X-rays, that's doable internationally now. That's a huge benefit for people in other nations. But the decisive point is that we're in a phase of transition, if it's new medicine, if it's e-mobility, if it's new work. And that's a point I'd like to stress because it's often underestimated. And that's a topic that we have to focus on much more. That's fake news, because we think when we talk about sustainability, it's not helpful when people say that there is no climate change happening. And there I'd like to ask you, what is the greatest challenge that lies ahead of us? What are the global challenges we'll be facing in the context of sustainability? Is it the essential point? Will it be climate change? Is it new technologies? Is it political instability? You can set the priorities, and then we see the first estimates are coming in. Global conflicts. I'll let the survey run for a while, because I'd like to talk a little longer about fake news while you continue to vote, because I'll show you the result then. Fake news is a huge problem, and we understand today that this is to do with the structure of networks. MIT has published a study and analyzed Twitter, and bad false news on Twitter spread much faster than real news. And against the backgrounds of global challenges, that's a huge problem, because communication becomes more specific, and you have to look, how do networks work? Do we build islands? We need plurality in our societies, and if we overshoot our targets and you have groups that fragment, then we have a situation that we see today and that we saw in the context of the pandemic as well. It's see that if the virus exists, and that's a point we need to discuss. And I could do a lot of more things, but I owe you your ranking. Where are the greatest challenges? And you see here it's climate change, global conflicts, and political instability. Those are the deciding problems. But the most important point in this transition that we're seeing is that we have to think more deeply about it. We have to think more deeply about what's the driving force of innovation. What is innovation all about? And in this context, I believe that we have blind spots, because we forget a lot of poor people in particular. And that's not just true globally. 20% of people live in megaplexes today, but also people here are living in poverty. And it's important for stability, which is a deciding factor for the future. And future started in many places because there are new laws that were introduced. You know that there was a verdict against Shell, against CO2 reduction in the last 2 weeks, the UN decade for sustainable development. This is a topic that's everywhere in the area of digitization. It's quite interesting because there's a lot that we can do. A concrete example is it's the new supply chains that now can be made more transparent because of digitization. So a lot of things are moving on. Will it only be technology now, or do we have to do more? And I have another question, and some of you have already answered. Are it the technical solutions, or do we need an evolution of a change of our culture? And I'm convinced, because I think it will not be just technical solutions, that I think that cultural change will also be essential, because we are living in a time where the old thinking is no longer valid. We have a problem that politics doesn't understand where we're going, and we have to think jointly on how to break old patterns. John Maynard Keynes stated that the biggest problem is not to let people accept new ideas, but to let them forget the old ones. And in particular, when it comes to progress, it's important to look into other categories. Where are we going? And I remain optimistic about the future. I believe that the digital future will be one that will be wonderful. And I think we have many challenges, but digitization gives us the new opportunities. And I think we should work on those, because it makes sense to improve the tools. And I'm ending with a quote that I like to reiterate by Pablo Picasso. He says, "It's the essence of modern people who are fearful of letting go, but the grace of being held makes them open towards new possibilities." And it's about that we work together and that we have an attitude that's open towards new things, and to also have the responsibility. We can change a lot in these times because we owe it to the next generation, because if not, Generation Emil will not be happy with us. I'd like to thank you for your attention. I know that the time is short, but we will have other opportunities to talk, and I will mail you your answers so you can reread them. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ranga Yogeshwar, for this personal and quite multifaceted view on the 21st century. We felt that the world becomes a better place. All the best to Hanif, and greet email from us. Thank you very much as well. Ladies and gentlemen, we continue to look into the future. We present to you two technological impulses for a sustainable future. I'm here at the backstage area with our next referent, Andreas Greis of T-Systems, responsible for digital solutions there, and Thomas Tschersich, the Chief Security Officer of Deutsche Telekom. Andreas, you start. You tell us how we can use technological solutions towards more sustainability. Are you ready? So let's go to the main area.
Andreas, du wirst uns jetzt gleich nicht nur vorstellen, die Maßnahmen, die T-Systems intern nutzt, den eigenen
Andreas, you will present to us not only the measures that T-Systems does internally in order to reduce your own ecological footprint, but you also will tell us what sustainable solutions T-Systems offers to interested customers if they want to protect the environment and consume fewer resources. Thank you very much, Ralf. Welcome to everyone. My name is Andreas Greis. I'm responsible for digital software projects and technical service for that. But I'd like to go back 15 years ago. I had a startup together with the Fraunhofer Society of Physics, and we looked at building energy efficiency and how to reduce the CO2 footprint and emissions there. And it was a truly challenging situation there.
So what did I learn? Maybe I can just give you some background information. 14% of the CO2 emission is produced by buildings. So that is definitely a significant portion. So we had a great use case. So we actually reduced exactly that. And I do think that the mindset was already going in that direction. So we definitely considered the incentives of individual actors in the market. So those were missing, and the business case didn't work. So the measures that are necessary that I had to introduce in order to make a building more energy efficient was a lot more expensive than actually using fossil fuels. And because of that, at that point in time, that happened. So that idea then also was still part of it, or that experience is something that is still important to me. And 15 years later, we're definitely further ahead. Public interest is definitely there. Attention is there. We have transparency across these topics. Organizations like the United Nations have lots of clusters that were defined with lots of goals that then actually have 233 KPIs in order to be transparent. Deutsche Telekom, for example, and other companies have sustainability concepts. They make that part of their company politics. They have goals, and of course they want to be climate neutral and be as neutral as possible, maybe even when it comes to water quality, etc. So the topics are definitely transparent in public. There are some guidelines from politics, and of course you have to pay attention to that, because wherever we regulate, there are always some problems once in a while. What do we do in T-Systems, Deutsche Telekom? There are three topics that I would like to talk about. So the first one is, what do we do from here, and concrete possibilities with our customers. I have two here, and I do think hopefully they're going to be interesting. And the third thing is going to be just some insight, where can that lead us? And if we talk about CO2 reduction and maybe also a negative CO2 footprint in the future. Okay, so of course we have to make sure that we know what we're doing for ourselves, because in IT, we are definitely dealing with digitalization, and of course, French company guessed that about 4% of the worldwide CO2 emissions are induced by digital technologies. And of course, that's twice as much as flights in 2019, so even before the pandemic. So of course, we are a relevant factor ourselves, and we have to make sure that we are efficient as possible, that we need to optimize, and because of our software programs, we need to make it where we are actually wasting as few resources as possible in data centers and clouds, and we consume as little as possible. And we have to make sure that we can optimize any time in order to make sure that our footprint is actually not overboarding. So Deutsche Telekom actually set a goal by 2014. We want to be net climate neutral. And of course, we have a lot of internal programs that contribute to that goal. Okay, so now the second part of it. The second part, which is the most important part to me today. What kind of specific projects do we have in place? What do we do in the market? So first and foremost, I would like to give you an example from the aerospace industry, or really airports. Us at T-Systems, we have an airport management system that's in charge of processes from landing to actually the planes leaving the airport. So through optimization via the system, which is a smart control unit, we can make it where the way from landing to the parking position, so the taxiing position, and then also from the taxiing position to starting, that can be a lot more efficient. And that then leads to, if you calculate all of that, we can save about 89 kilograms CO2 per start is possible. And if you then calculate that with all the different starts and different airports, all of these small amounts are adding up to significant contributions. Okay, this is a solution that we're using today, for example, in the airport in Frankfurt, Berlin, Bangalore, Stansford, just to mention a few. And interestingly enough, this solution can be multiplied. So what works in one airport is also going to work for all the other airports as well. And all of a sudden, we are then sort of in a local footprint, and that is changing into a global footprint. The second example I would like to mention today has something to do with data, but again, it also has something to do with the car industry, because big amounts of data are required in order to be analyzed. And we heard it earlier, data amounts are exploding, and we do have an opportunity to come as them. So 90% of that, and that then leads to, it's sort of similar to MP3 for music. You remember that a couple of years ago, that was a new invention. So we can actually downscale amounts of data and then increase efficiencies, and we don't need as much storage capacity. So if we look at the specific application use case, those are test drives from pre-series vehicles in the car industry. And with that, we made it where we could reduce test drives. So we also have less vehicles that are needed, so by 30%. So that means that we have less travels, etc., etc. And the way we did it was we made data more available, and we were able to improve analytics and need less storage capacity. And if you know that a pre-series vehicle, a prototype, is then going to be crashed after the test, you sort of have an idea what kind of resources can be saved. It is very important that apart from the use case, the business case was also important. And that's why there was an implementation. So innovations like that and really using data like that is one of them, then lead to solutions that then were tested via a use case, and they're improving everything via the business case all the way to the solution. And of course, now you can wonder, okay, small steps, they're only small steps. And if you then think about Germany overall has a portion when it comes to worldwide CO2 emission of 1.93%, 1.93%. So how are these small steps helpful? And I do think it's very, very important to understand that every tiny step counts and is helpful. And that maybe also shows what we just heard about the cultural change. So there's no reason, if the use case and the business case are right, there's no reason for us to not be active. Okay, just some foresight of Q3. Of course, it's not only about CO2 emission and reducing all of that being neutral, but CO2 is not reduced in the atmosphere by itself. So we have to have long-term solutions. We have to make sure that we have negative CO2, so we take it out of the atmosphere, basically. And in order to do that, there are lots of innovative projects. And all these projects, of course, require data analytics. They do need simulation, etc. And they also need smart control on the software side. And of course, we are definitely in the beginning steps, but we want to contribute. So it is important for me to show you that even this is something that we have in our horizon. So we definitely look ahead here. We're not only dealing with specific topics at the moment, but also future topics that are a lot more innovative. Okay, so if I'm supposed to summarize everything, I would say, even if you're very enthusiastic and even if you really consider all the big things that are ahead of us, we definitely always have to look at our overall overarching goals: stopping climate change, managing temperatures, right, reducing our CO2 footprint. All of that is important, but we have to start small. We have to look at our business cases apart from the use cases, and we have to make sure that it makes sense, that the market participants have an advantage and then see it directly and therefore can be active right away. And with this, I would like to end my speech. Yeah, Andreas, thank you very much. Thank you very much for this impulse. It's very nice to hear that there are a lot of things that are already happening. But to be fair, despite the specific examples you've shown, not all industries are jumping on board and are as excited about the whole topic of sustainability. That's why I do have a final question for you. What is going to have to happen so that we actually see a big change in Germany's economy, Europe's economy, and the economy worldwide, so that sustainability is driven forward? Do we need more regulatory pressure, or maybe just the ultimative business case? Well, we need both. We definitely need both, because we saw some misguidance or some failure. That's what you saw in my first example from my startup experience, and the market just didn't work in that way. Why not? Well, because the costs that arose were there, but there was no benefit. And at that point in time where there's a big gap, you do need regulatory bodies, you do need support. But on the other hand, all of these small use cases, they may be small on a global scale, but they are big locally. And if it's evident, you need to really connect that approach from the bottom with the approach from the top, and then maybe with the United Nations, that is the right approach. And I'm very optimistic. There's no reason to be worried, and I do think we're going to be able to manage it. Thank you very much for all of that, Andreas Greis. Thank you. Okay, dear guests, dear viewers, we are now going to continue with impulse number 2. And I would now like to welcome Thomas Tschersich. He's the Chief Security Officer of the Deutsche Telekom. Thomas, welcome. Welcome in Bonn. And security and sustainability. Some of our viewers may wonder what these two things have in common, how they are connected and linked. But I do think we can probably understand it, because if we talk about the important aspect of data and IT security, you end up at company security, also when it comes to producing products and digital services that are part of a globalized value-added chain. So I do think then it makes sense to actually have these two elements, security and sustainability. Yeah, not only in that case, but in English, we're talking about security and safety. So when it comes to safety, it is very, very obvious when it comes to sustainability, but also when it comes to security. So if I have digital business models, for example, they're based on the fact that my customers trust me, that I am actually handling their data well, to say it in very simple terms. And security is definitely an imperative part of that. And that is really what we need in order to be sustainable. Just last week, you actually did something for the association Germany Safety in Online. You actually introduced an index. So how big is that threat? What do private people and also companies have to be ready for? Well, the interesting thing is when it comes to Germany Safely Online, we're asking people how they perceive the security and safety online to just have a statistical basis for our work. And what I personally found very surprising was that over the course of the last year, the perception actually remained the same. So it actually just stagnated by 0.1 points. So it's sort of the same level. And despite the pandemic, some people call it pandemic, but I said it's the biggest digitalization project of humankind that we're driving forward right now, with lots of uncertainties, with lots of insecurities, with lots of new technologies. Lots of companies rely on working from home, home office, weren't ready for that at all. And then, of course, there are lots of risks that are arising. And, of course, attackers are using that. They are taking advantage of exactly that. We see lots of attackers that actually took the pandemic as a vehicle in order to use phishing attacks on their victims and things like that. And of course, that definitely does have a different kind of quality. Okay, that is a good key term. Corona being a push for digitalization. Okay, obviously, there was more home office, and of course, we work digitally a lot more. However, what we didn't hear quite often is just really that because of this change, the number of cyber attacks also increased by 30%. So companies have to do something. What can they do in order to sort of take that push through Corona, but not be fearful of being exposed to further cyber attacks? I think during the first phase of the pandemic, and that was probably a naive phase of digitalization, I would say. So everybody was just driven by, okay, making it possible that we can still continue on, that we can still work. And I would say sustainability really wasn't the main thing that people were thinking about. And it was really just mainly about functionality and still being able to work. And then after that, we had a phase, and that is also when the attacks started. So where you said, ooh, okay, I'm going to have to do something now in order to sort of secure my situation. So for example, use your computer at home. In the beginning, there was no alternative to it. And maybe that is not the best idea long term in order to be able to work safely and to protect company data. But I do think that is something that then worked well after a while. And a lot of companies are actually well prepped for it. However, still the pandemic showed one thing, which is that we always have to be ready for the next event. And there's just one simple example, which is companies that were used to actually have a lot of people in their sales force, etc. They were actually well prepped for it, because if you are traveling a lot and you're working from a hotel or from home, that really doesn't make a big difference. And those that were used to it, working only from their offices, of course, for them, it was a lot more challenging. Okay, very specifically, what does a company have to do and what does the role of security have to entail so that it is not a hindrance and that you have a limited work capability, but it's really a supporting factor instead? I think safety and security is seen as a hindrance at first, very often. And I can just tell you from my experience with a lot of customers, it's definitely changing as soon as there is a problem. So then you can tell, oh, okay, if I had prepped differently for it, if I had taken security more seriously, if I had taken that as a functional design characteristic, then it would have never been the way it is now. So encryption of data, for example, is something that could have been prevented in many cases by just setting up very simple processes. So just like you actually take your car to be serviced every 2 years, that's what you have to do with your IT systems as well. And the most essential security thing is to really use your software wisely. And that is not something where I would say, okay, I'm going to have top experts for that. I just have to do my homework. That's it. However, still, that is also something that we're seeing. If we want to help customers then avoid attacks or then also overcome the repercussions of attacks, that is something that you could have been able to detect before. So the indicators in the log data of the IT systems were there. However, there was nobody checking that out. So that means security is not only the design functionality, but it is also security in the operation that has to be implemented. A log photo only helps you if you also check it out. And then you can see, ooh, something is happening in my system right now that's not supposed to happen. Then you can react in due time before there's any damage. Okay, and that interval should be shorter than 2 years, hopefully, less than a vehicle. Yeah, absolutely. And we can see that the operating system manufacturer, if they have a software update, then 3 or 4 years ago, it took weeks or months for actually see attacks in these gaps, and now it's only hours. So that means even attackers are using methods like machine learning in order to be more efficient and be faster. And of course, we also have to be stronger when it comes to defending. Okay, Thomas, the IP protocol is something that we see everywhere, in the commuting center, everywhere, hospitals, etc. And very often we hear that companies really want to strictly separate the classic office IT with internet connection and production critical systems. Does that really still make sense? Can you still do that? Well, I have a nice anecdote about that. So just a while ago, I actually was at a production site for a big company and I talked to their manager and he told me, okay, everything is very strictly separated here. So office IT with internet access, just like you described it just now. And we have our robots and our plants, they're all strictly separated. And I asked him, okay, do you see on your computer the current production? And he said, yeah, I see everything. I see everything up to the last robot. I can see how much glue the robot is using. And then he noticed what he was saying. So these systems aren't really separated anymore. So we're linking these systems. And of course, there are many good reasons for doing so. However, we are linking them with the internet protocol. It's not like it's specific knowledge for industrial controls anymore in order to attack them, but it's really internet technology that every student knows about. And that's exactly how we have to prep for everything. So we just have to make sure that these systems are in the focus of attackers as well. And these systems have to be protected. The good news is that we've learned about that over decades in IT, and that is knowledge that can be transferred quite easily. So it's not like this is just a very new technology or anything like that that's required, but you just have to do your homework and you just have to do whatever you've learned from a different domain, which is the classic office IT, and then you have to transfer that. Of course, there's also some additional knowledge, some additional technology, but I think the basis is definitely the same in the beginning that you need. Okay, lots of politicians in Europe, but also in Germany, are really dreaming about digital sovereignty. And if I look at our network, then I can see quite easily, and I'm not even an expert, I can see hardware and chips, they're made in China, and the software that we're working with is from the United States. So what is left for us in Europe in the sandwich position? What is left for us other than actually managing IT properly? Will it be even worse if the chips were primarily actually produced in Taiwan? Then they are delivered to China. That's where the electronic components are put together. And then everything is then shipped to Europe again. And the software is then going to be produced somewhere in the world. And I mean, we really have tried very hard in the past, Dresden, for example, where we actually tried to build up an industry again for semiconductors, for example. The problem that we haven't noticed is that if we look at the production of everything is in China, then it doesn't make any sense to have semiconductors in Europe. So we have to have the whole process chain here. And you can see in the car industry in Dresden, they have primarily chips for the car industry because I have a very short supply chain from the chip through the components all the way to the vehicle. And if we then want to achieve digital sovereignty, we actually have to make sure that we look at the holistic process chain from the beginning to end. And we can't just say we're going to look at the semiconductors. That's just too short. So on September 26th, we are going to elect a new parliament. And we were recently told that Russia actually wanted to attack German governments. Are they just digital power plays, or is this just political influence? It's really about political influence, and you just try to do things that are good for you right now. But of course, you can also say, luckily, our risk of manipulation is quite low. However, if we just think about it, we just heard earlier that fake news are a big thing. And I do think it is more and more important to recognize and to differentiate what is real information, was maybe manipulated truth. And of course, in a digitalized world, that is more and more difficult. So I think about examples like deepfakes, for example. I can't only just pretend that this is the voice of the speaker, but of course there are also some approaches where you can actually manipulate video phone calls that I have the impression we are talking to each other, even though I am talking to somebody completely different. And of course, the technological development is also somewhat of an hindrance, I would say, because for us as humans, it's very difficult to differentiate in that situation. That's why we do have to invest here in research. We have to invest in research in order to really not endanger our democracy long term. Thomas, thank you very much for this information about IT security. Now, I would like to ask you my final questions. So how is everything connected to sustainability? That's our original topic. So what does a company have to do, and in what kind of direction should that development go? Well, I'm very convinced that the classic differentiation that we have today between IT and production systems is definitely not goal-oriented anymore. This is domain knowledge that we have to bring together, and we have to make sure that there aren't any silos in companies anymore. We have to break them open, and we have to learn from each other. The good news is, though, that there is a lot that we do know how to do in IT, and we have to transfer that to new things. We have to build new offers, and that is something that I've learned in many conversations with our clients as well. So we definitely have to catch up here. So if we really want to have stability long term and have sustainability in our production lines. Yeah, that was very, very interesting, Thomas. I think we could continue on forever. However, we don't have any time anymore, so the following program points can't be 20 minutes late. Okay, thank you very much for your visit in our studio today, and see you next time. Yeah, thank you as well. Okay, and with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to now start our panel discussion. Over the next 30 minutes, I'm going to talk to a health professor, a digitalization person, and also a sustainability manager. It's very, very interesting. It's a very good setup. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Digitalization and sustainability being a long-term success factor, best practices from the industries. That is what this topic is called. And we now have David Matusevich. He's the professor for medicine technology at the University for Economy and Management, FOM. And since 2015, he's responsible for health and social business. I also have Markus Witterli here from Bern. He's in charge of the SBB, and he's in charge of company development infrastructure. And we also have Christian Tillröder here. He's the Global Portfolio Operation Excellent, and he's also one of the management board members at T-Systems, and he's responsible for sustainability. Gentlemen, I'm very happy that we are here together today, and I would like to get started right away. Till, the very first question is for you. So sustainability is something that is very important in many companies, and that also makes it that where many different business units collaborate very closely. So what is it like at T-Systems? What was your first step, and how did you make it where your CO2 footprint was understood in order to then derive measures from there? Yeah, thank you very much. So the start is very important for us, and for us it was very important to have a dedicated team. This is not something that you just do on the side. Of course, people were supposed to come from different areas, but it's also very important to find people who are excited about this topic and then actually talk about it, looking into this topic together. And the second element is that using external knowledge. So we have the Detikon, a subsidiary that does it for all the different industries. And we actually then use the carbon footprint consulting in order to figure out, okay, what is it like here? There are standards in the market. There are also established ideas for topics that we can't test yet. And then also we have a step towards a certification, for example, by an auditor. It's only a small step. And the third element that I wanted to mention is the whole topic of looking into detail. So it's not only about step 1 and 2, so just your own direct footprint, but it's also about value-added chains. And in order to do that, you have to really look at everything in depth into this whole topic in order to set the basis, as you already said, and then actually taking the right levers in the future. Yeah, hospitals are already integrating sustainability more and more into their company strategy, but very often it's only about lowering their energy consumption or reducing packaging waste. Couldn't targeted digitalization and connected medical care have a positive impact for patients and the environment equally? Yeah, definitely. So I would say a lot of hospitals are currently trying to, well, there was a time where they called themselves smart hospitals. So now it's mainly about them calling themselves green tech smart hospital. And I do think the whole topic of sustainability, as you said, it's not only about saving paper or lowering energy consumption, but it's mainly just about making it where you have a sustainable strategy, how you are going to link that. So it really starts with what kind of partners I'm collaborating with, what kind of startups I'm working with, and what kind of players I'm working with. That's the only way how you can actually take sustainability seriously top down. It starts with this event. It's also about traveling of employees, but also sustainable further goals, cooperation partners. And I do think it's a concept. The whole topic of sustainability should definitely be part of every project that's happening at a hospital. And in line with that, you would have to think about strategic key points and build cockpits. And I do think a lot of people have understood that. However, if we look at that as a mountain, we're definitely at the foot of the mountain, and we definitely have to look at all the different possibilities that are arising. However, this is still the beginning step, and I do think that the very first topic is definitely mindset when it comes to employees, and that is something that we do see. Yeah, that is definitely a great bridge that was built in order to address our guests in Switzerland. Sustainability is also something that's very important for your country, and it's been very important for you for decades, and also awareness within your country is very, very high. Does that also help you to show your company how important this topic is? Yeah, definitely. So a train company definitely has to play this pioneering role in this playing field, and it's also nothing new to us. So maybe we didn't call it sustainability in the past, but it was definitely called environmentally friendly. I think that was 50 years ago. So we are the most environmentally friendly transportation in the world. And I do think we're fully electrified, and of course we cover the need that we need with our new trains. And of course, for a long time we didn't call it sustainable, but today is definitely part of the sustainability concept. For us, sustainability is not just an opportunity, but it's a holistic approach. And of course, there's lots of research done along the whole value-added chain, and also it's a holistic approach. At the end of the day, a lot of things are evolving around saving resources, specifically those resources that are scarce. So that could be simple things like steel, for example. And I would also say that we look at ecological sustainability. That is something that we've been dealing with for a long time, and now we're combining that more and more with economic sustainability. And of course, the key term would be, for example, using tax means, etc. So it's really just using taxes in a sustainable way that makes sense. And then also social sustainability. So that would be the impact on our society, living spaces, etc., etc. So that is something that is melting together more and more. And the employees of RBB are actually part of that. They live it on a daily basis. They experience it on a daily basis. They are pioneers, but also in the way that we are running our business on a daily basis. But we don't have to explain to our customers what that means anymore, and neither to our employees. Okay, T-Systems still. We have short-term and long-term sustainability goals, and that part of that is also technological progress, and we already talked about that. But my question to you is, what kind of role do compensating CO2 certificates play, long-term and short-term? Well, the focus is definitely on solutions in order to reach and achieve sustainability. So really achieving them in a sustainable way as well. So not to compensate by using certificates. However, when it comes to global supply chains that I just talked about, supply chains make up 80% of the emissions. So that is really the value added change along the whole chain. And of course, if we see that in our delivery performance, we are in some countries where we're not in a position to actually reduce emissions long term and have them at zero. And that's why it is a possible means in order to sort of compensate here. However, it's not a sustainable way. So that's why we are using it to add to it. However, the very clear focus and also the focus by using innovation, for example, and technologies is definitely on the actual complete avoidance of emissions. Okay, so that is very, very clear. It's a very clear statement. Yes. Okay, Mr. Vitelli, the future of SBB is supposed to be digital, and mobility of the future should be smart. And you have the program Smart Wave 4.0. What kind of specific goals do you have with that program? Well, I would say at the moment we have two big challenges when it comes to trains. So first and foremost, it's about to actually making it where trains are fuller. So we have a big portion of commuters. So we definitely have a lot of people going in the morning and in the afternoon. So on the one hand, it's really about making sure that that is balanced out. So that means over the course of the day, we need to have good offers. So that requires some flexibility, because over the course of the day, we have free time travelers, maybe also on the weekends, in the evening and in the morning. That would mainly be commuters. So that is one of the things. Digitalization of the production chain and really making it where customers can get everything they need as easily as possible and get from A to B as easily as possible. And I would say that our train production system is definitely built on an analog system, similar to streets. So it's really up to the train driver, how fast he's driving or how fast he's allowed to drive, how quickly he's braking, what kind of signals are on green and red. So lots of analog transfers. But with our system, a lot of safety resources are being used in order to avoid that there are any catastrophes or accidents. Humans are usually the limiting factor, and now we want to actually change the way how we are producing. So that means digitalization is going to give us an overview of how many people are taking trains when and where, and then if there are exceptions, we can make the right decisions in terms of, okay, which trains should be slowed down, should be accelerated, so that the overall system is actually safe. And when it comes to digitalization of the whole value added chain, and that starts with trip planning, so conception of our map, and then also the calculation and variances, and then also the creation and introduction of definitely also the train steering units. And that means that these generations are going to be digitalized. And that is definitely our production chain. That is just one step that is going to help us making sure that we are going to be more sustainable in the future. Things are going to be more digitalized and managed that way. That can also be done in regular traffic, for example. So you need some distance to the person in front of you so that you can brake in due time if there is, for example, a traffic jam or something like that. Technically, this distance could be reduced to a minimum. However, that doesn't work because humans are a little bit more difficult. The same holds true when it comes to trains. So if we, for example, have a little bit of a train problem, if a train stops, for example, then these interruptions can be part of the network, and that means that then actually there's more jams everywhere, and the result would then be delays in our whole network. And we want to counteract that by actually getting smart support and making sure we can solve these delays. And there are lots of different technical hindrances. So you need to be fully digitalized for that. You need a good lever for that. And I need to know specifically how reality is actually mirrored here currently so that I can then make the right decision. And of course, we do need fast computing power in order to then also change schedules and define them, recalculate them. And of course, we also need a good overview of where trains are at, with what kind of characteristics, and all of that then needs to be combined. And not all of these technical hindrances have been solved yet. So for example, locating vehicles. It's very easy if they're in open field, but it's very, very difficult if it's in busier places. Okay, Mr. Vitelli, let me ask. I would like to ask you to give me a short answer. How long is it going to take to actually get to a place that you just described? I think when it comes to scheduling, that is something that we're going to be able to achieve in just a few years. We already have some simulations and fully automated operations. That's probably going to be a decade or even more. Okay, and with that, I'm going to hand over to David. So the German healthcare system, we hear that again and again, is sort of lagging behind in comparison to other industries when it comes to digitization. Can you tell us how big that delay is and which topics are your top priority at the moment? Yeah, sure, I can do that. So people say that the healthcare industry is about 10 to 12 years behind e-commerce, automotive, and other industries. So it's definitely a big gap, maybe even more so than that. But yeah, I do think it has something to do with the fact that we have had a position where we accepted it for a long time. And I mean, there's lots of regulations, etc., because healthcare system is based on our social law, and those are 100 years old red books, and that is sort of the basis, and that is a system that is very close to the state, and innovation is not based on the state. It's really driven by competition, etc. But what we're experiencing now is definitely Jens Spahn over the past probably 22 months or something like that. He actually brought about more than 20 laws. So we're now definitely on the way to be the #1 worldwide. That's not a joke. So when it comes to app, we are worldwide the only ones in Germany where I can already get an app or a health application that can be prescribed. That is not available anywhere. There are 13 of them, and that is not something that everybody's using yet, but that is something that we can do now. So we're right in the middle of it. And the most important topics, and you asked for that, are definitely electronic health cards. So that means that all the data, regardless of what kind of doctor I'm visiting, everything's available everywhere. And from my point of view, that's also a cloud topic. So I think we have to be more courageous. We need a German cloud solution where we could actually use our ID card and you sort of have data available anytime like you do with online banking. I think that could save a lot of lives, because we can't forget that due to the fact that digitalization is not as progressive, or that we're lagging behind other industries, that doesn't only mean that we're not as good. It also means that every year there are several people who are dying because they don't have polypharmacy, or they do have it and they don't know, okay, I don't know which medication is taking what. Nobody has an overview. The patient is going to see 3 doctors, 3 pharmacists, and those are sort of reserves that we need. You know what I mean? That is something that we have to solve. Electronic prescriptions and patient cards, patient folders. So I think for about 15 years now, we've been trying to bring that about. And now next year, we're going to start that with that electronic prescription. We're also been doing that for 10 years. So we have lots of different topics that we're trying to cover right now. And hopefully next year, they are then going to actually be rolled out. They're going to be part of the cloud so that I can be better taken care of. And even today, just to show where we're at, last week, for example, I was at a hospital and I got a DVD at the end with my pictures on it. And I told him I don't have a DVD player, and I also didn't even know if my doctor has a DVD player. He may only have a CD player or nothing. And that is today's situation. We're working with old technologies. And when it comes to fax, for example, 60% of communication is actually using fax as standard communication. 60% of doctors don't even have an email address. You know, although there's lots to be done, but we're definitely on the right track, and I'm looking forward to the changes. Well, we talked about the acceleration because of Corona when it comes to digitalization a lot today. So when it comes to doctors and patients, do you actually see more willingness to use digital tools? Definitely, definitely. So in 2019, we had about 600 telemedicine applications in Germany. So people who were like, we are here today, so they just met via video calls. So 600 in all of Germany. Last year in 2020, it was about 1.2 million. So you can definitely see a big jump here. And I do think those are processes that can't be taken back anymore. So first and foremost, because people and doctors have learned how to deal with it, and they can tell that maybe individual aspects are a lot faster this way, are saving time. And from my point of view, the customer is definitely the driver when it comes to health, because we can select our own doctor. So that means in the future, especially when I'm out in the country, I'm definitely going to think about, okay, do I want to drive 40 kilometers for a 5-minute doctor's appointment? And now I'm going to do that with the doctor I want to. And I mean, there are lots of different portals today that are sort of apart from regular care, and they offer services, especially young people in cities. They are willing to pay 10, 15 euros in order to not have to take a half day off. And all of these effects then lead to, okay, A, the technology is there, B, because of Corona, we learned to deal with it. And of course, we know how convenient it is. And from my point of view, that's going to lead to us doing that in a sustainable way in the future. Mr. Vitali, so talking about sustainable mobility, SBB wants to make it where more people are switching to trains, and also goods should be transported on rail. So does that mean that you also have to expand your network, and then you're going to have to use more resources? Or could digitalization actually help you have more trains on the same track? Well, we actually started talking about that earlier. So we really have to rely on, not every time we are getting an additional offer, we want to introduce something, we are going to then actually have to build new tracks. So we want to use our networks in an ideal way and make sure that we are upscaling our capacities. That is definitely what we're focusing on. And as I said earlier, the big benefit would be that the trains are going to be filled up more. More people should take the train, and more goods should be transported via rail. So that means that access of global sites to that should be as easy as possible. Digitalization can definitely help with that by just making information available and showing good options, how everything could be implemented. And that should then also, like I said, be implemented. And if there is something going wrong, then there should be ideal suggestions as well, when and where a next alternative is available, in order to then close that gap. And in regards to capacities. I already talked about that. So it's really about avoiding that we have to build new rails. First of all, it's expensive. And secondly, specifically in Switzerland, we don't have so much space anymore. So every time we want to build something, we have to either go beyond ground, underground, or build bridges. And we don't want to do that. That is definitely the most expensive way of doing it. So we want to avoid that whenever possible. Okay, so talking about products and elements, Andreas already talked about that. If we're quite honest, what is bigger? Saving costs that you have to do as a company if you count on sustainability, or would it be the business potential, or really does it not matter for whatever reason a company decides to go with sustainability? That's a very interesting question. What we've noticed is that right now, long-term is something that is connected with higher costs individually. The projects that we have to implement for that, and it's really mainly about the projects that we heard about earlier. So we've heard great examples. It's really about projects that have to save resources because digitalization has computing power. And of course, that is something that has to be as efficient as possible. And we can tell that there are significant saving potentials. However, you have to invest first. So the short-term approach from our point of view for each individual is definitely that it could be cost neutral, best case scenario, but very often it's also connected to costs. However, this is just a short-term view and it's a very singular view. So for all of us, looking at it long-term as a company and then also as a person, but also as a company, it's definitely a cost driver. And that's why it is a very important topic to me. But then if that topic of driving income is actually part of that, my personal opinion is if you have a great idea to be more sustainable for the environment and then we can make a lot of money with that, that is absolutely fine with me. Go ahead and tell me. Okay, so German vaccination centers are printing paper more and more. So you get lots of different papers that you have to sign before. All of these 100,000 pieces of paper, could that have been actually avoided? Well, that's almost a suggestive question. And me being a pioneer when it comes to digitization, somebody that is really in favor of that, of course, I am very upset about that. So the printers in Germany started printing vouchers and sending them via mail. And then they said, okay, they can't be falsified and you can get them at the pharmacy. And that's just crazy in my point of view. And of course, you can do many different things. It's understandable that you say, okay, but there are also older people, etc., etc. So why couldn't you build a homepage where some people can register, those that feel that the environment is important, and they can just download their QR code and everybody else can get it via mail. It doesn't have to be a one-fits-all solution, you know, and of course you can do several different things at the same time. And by doing that, you could help everybody. And I was really upset about that because in the beginning of the pandemic, when I went to a restaurant, for example, it's not only health, but we also have to think about it's really all other industries as well. Gastronomy, for example, I just started filling in some paper and I could see right away who was there before me at what point in time, with who, talking about data protection. I saw their email address, their phone number, etc. And again, like I said, this is where Germany's at, and I think some still haven't understood to work with QR codes or apps. So I do think we have to be faster, and I do think we also have to be more courageous, and we can't be scared. Even if a system is being hacked, which was the topic we just discussed, then it is what it is. But on the other hand, we are saving something for millions of people. We're saving a lot of paper, lots of bureaucracy, and of course, we definitely also have to sort of weigh the risks here. And I'm still very much convinced that the opportunity is definitely a lot bigger. And during the pandemic, we should have learned faster. And I hope that it's now very, very obvious. So that was the headline of the past few years or weeks. So what schools have done during the pandemic was just as good as the summer break. And those are just different industries, not only health. And I hope we're learning from that. Okay, so we're just laughing that he got really upset about it. Is he right? Yeah, definitely. I think we've all experienced a lot during that time, but it was important that we experience it because we are a federal state. And of course, we do need that cultural change as well, the cultural change that we talked about this morning too, and we've heard about it. So it's not like us at T-Systems. We are definitely looking into technology a lot. But of course, that change, and that was your question at the beginning, what have we done in order to use the right levers is a cultural topic. So I do think we do need a lot of people to get upset to really bring about that change. And that's why I was smiling. And it's a very important point. It's not just one size fits all. Of course, we have lots of different groups that we have to consider in our society. My parents, they're 87 years and they don't have a smartphone. So the son is then actually making sure that they get vaccinated. But as we heard earlier, that cultural change is something that is convincing me in a positive way. I'm happy that we started and we're not going to turn back anymore. We're going to continue on with it. Okay, Mr. Vitali, using new technologies and new devices and software in the office environment, that is something that we see everywhere. And that is really something that we see everywhere. But the closer digitalization is coming to Rails, the more complicated it is. What kind of challenges do you see outdoor? Well, that is a very interesting and important question. Talking about culture. So, of course, you can imagine that the circumstances in Rails can be very rough. In Switzerland, it's a very nice day today, so it's easy, it's warm. But very often, of course, the environmental circumstances aren't that great. So it could be very cold. And then, of course, it can be quite difficult. So definitely Rails have to be very robust. And the devices that employees are using in order to really do their data processing that they need to do. And then, as I said, digitalization is very important. So we do need real-time information about conditions on Rails and also work, etc. And the answer to this question is probably very simple. We do have to make it where it's as easy as possible for the user to use the devices and manage them, handle them, etc. Everything should be as simple as possible, maybe even with gloves. Maybe it could be voice-controlled interfaces. Very often, these employees don't speak German, but some other language. And all of that is something that we have to consider when we talk about digitalization. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And we've had the experience quite often that the solutions that we're thinking about, they just don't work out in the real world. And we didn't even talk about that we would need an internet connection. So it's really just thinking about the end-to-end solution, then acting accordingly. Okay, considering the time, I would now like to ask the final question, and I would like to ask all three of you to answer it, and I would like for you to answer as briefly as possible. So during this panel, you represented different industries, and I would like to know how your industry is going to deal with digitalization over the next few years. And we're going to see an established still stand, or is there going to be disruptive jumps? And I would like for you to get started with health. Well, we're right in the middle of it, and that's why I'm very happy that we actually put it on the right track, and hopefully we can go ahead full force. Okay, Mr. Vitali, what kind of development do you see in the Swiss rail? Definitely no standstill. The developments that I indicated are going to continue on, and we're definitely going to electrify everything. And renewable energies are going to be used, and we're going to implement that. Okay, and then Till is going to have the final statement. Established standstill or disruptive jumps. What is going to happen in the information and communication technology? Disruptive jumps, first of all, because we do need it. We are still facing big challenges that we're going to have to face together. We have heard about great examples and great approaches, and we are definitely going to make them possible by way of technology. And technology is going to help us with the cultural change. And we are definitely going to have disruptive jumps, and that is good. Okay, gentlemen, then at this point in time, I would like to say thank you very much for this very interesting exchange of information. I'm very happy that you took the time to be here today and talk to us live during this forum and be part of this panel discussion. Thank you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now I would like to apologize for the technical disruption that we've had during this show. I heard that the platform is now available for everybody again, and we are live. All right, so now we have reached the end of the panel discussion, and also the plenary session is over. So that was only the warm-up phase, though, and we are now going to continue with the branch meeting of T-Systems. So now we are going to continue just as dynamically. In just a few moments, we are going to start with the branch and industry-specific breakout sessions. To the left of the streaming window, you're going to be able to see the buttons where you can reach the individual webinars. So select between chemistry and pharma, industries like transport and trade, banking and insurance, and of course, healthcare. And Professor Tschersich is going to be there, and I do think it's going to be a very turbulent group, and you should be part of that. You're going to get more insights and impulses. Please also take advantage of the on-demand area and visit our virtual exhibition if you want to. Okay, so at this studio, we are going to say thank you very much for being a viewer today and for being interested. And yeah, it's still going to be a very nice day, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the program.